what comes back when you live in a way where you honor other people. You don't just accept them for who they are, you honor them for who they are. I mean, I used to say, I accept people for who they are. No. I honor people for who they are. And when you approach human beings, complete strangers, with this feeling inside, and I'll say a feeling of love, you radiate a different energy, a different vibrational frequency.
Hey gang, welcome to another episode of No More Strangers. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Peter Grazier. Peter is a retired engineer and a self-published author, both of which are stories in their own right. We met several months ago through the local Monroe Institute meditation group on one of my visits to Portland, Oregon. After the meditation, I introduced myself to him and asked if he could tell me more about something that he brought up during discussion. Fortunately for all of us, he is a completely open book on the subject of his experiences. After losing his wife, Barbara, Peter's life started to shift in ways that challenged his entire framework for understanding the world. Peter isn't trying to convince anyone of anything. He's simply sharing what happened and how it's changed both his perspective and his perception of reality itself. You, being the savvy listener that you are, may note that this episode has a different focus or sense to it than many of my previous episodes, and that is intentional. I'm working on spinning off a new series which focuses on stories like this one and the exploration of life through a less material-forward lens. If you enjoy this content, have questions about it, or even just want to tell me what I can be doing better, please reach out to me directly at the email address in the show notes, in the comments, or even on my social media placements. I want to continue to improve the show, and your feedback is helpful for me personally. With that out of the way, I really hope that you enjoy the conversation and can take something away from it for yourself. My name is JT Erickson, and this is No More Strangers. And just like that, we're live.
Yay.
Peter, thank you for having me out to your place. And seems to be sort of a tradition on the show at this point, but you've plied me with espresso and pastries, which is beyond appreciated on this beautiful rainy morning in Portland.
Yeah.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Life's a joy, and I'm blessed in many ways, and so life is great. And I'm just living it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm learning to do more of this, but would you mind telling the listeners and me for fun who you are? Why are you sitting here across from me?
Well, we met we have a commonality in the Monroe Institute, and there's a local Monroe group of a dozen or so people who once a month on the first Saturday to have a meditation together and talk and share experiences. And it's an organization that has been exploring what is in the non-physical world and what comes next. And it draws a lot of people who have had experiences like myself who want to understand them more, and people that are just curious. All of us are curious. We have a curious nature. We want to explore that part of our world, which we can't see. And if you've had experiences, and like mine, you want to understand where they came from. And so it's just been a wonderful journey. And we met at the local meditation, and it's just enjoyable to find people who are open to talk about these subjects because they're real. Those of us who've had experiences know they're real, and yet sometimes it's a little difficult to find people who are comfortable enough to open and share and relate their experiences together. And
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm always open for that. I'll turn to anybody standing in a waiting line somewhere, and if we'll start talking, and it doesn't surprise me that frequently someone will bring up the fact that they've lost someone recently. And I can relate to that, having lost my wife 18 years ago. My first wife, after 40 years of marriage, lost her to an illness. And a year and a half later was suggested that, I go see a medium, and I said, I don't think so. I'm an engineer by background and training. I have a linear mindset. I'm a facts-based person, but I'm open. And I think open is one of the key words here. And when it was suggested to me, I'd already been suffering with her death for a year and a half, and it was right message, right time. And so I said, okay, and made an appointment with a medium and went totally skeptical. He perfectly understood that. And within 5 to 10 minutes, he was bringing through facts for me that only the two of us could have known. And it caught my attention.
Yeah.
And for the next hour, once I knew she was in the room, and it took about 2 or 3 facts right in a row before this little lightning bolt went up and down my spine, and I said, holy shit, she's really here.
And when you say facts, you don't mean this isn't something like a platform mediumship, which is somebody cold reading the room, sort of fishing.
No.
This
was one-on-one.
Yeah.
So this had a little health food store. This was in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. And he knew Barbara. We had gone to the store, and he knew I was suffering. And a year and a half into that, I went up to pay him, and there was nobody in the store. So he said, you need to go see a friend of mine. And that's when he said, his name is Ricky and is a medium. And I said, I don't think so. And then he told me his story of how he met Ricky and got my attention. And I knew I had been suffering. I didn't know what to do about it. I'm not a grief counseling kind of person to go into that kind of session. So I just, on a whim, I just went, and it changed everything. He brought through facts right at the beginning, because Barbara, my wife, knew to get to me, you had to bring it through facts. And I don't know how much detail to go into at this point, but
no, whatever feels right to you.
Yeah,
this is good.
He said, he actually gave me, we sat down at a small wooden table, and it wasn't weird. There was no weird things in the room. It was a normal office, like a third story in a very modern office building. And we sat down at this table. He gave me a deck of cards to shuffle, which I did. I gave them back to him, and he paused for a moment. He pushed the cards aside, and he says, I don't need these. She's here. And I listened to that with skepticism.
Of course.
And the engineering mind in me, even the 2 weeks prior to that, I'm thinking to myself, what could he say that 80% of the time is going to hit and make me think that this is real?
Right.
I mean, that's where I was.
Of course.
I've taken courses on probability and statistics, so I understand some of that. But the first thing that he did was he said, she wants me to draw something for you. He says, I never draw. He says, I don't do this, but she's making me. So he drew a stick figure of a body, and he drew a circle on the chest opposite the heart, on the side opposite the heart, and he drew 2 dots at the base of the neck. And when I saw that, I was startled, because he drew exactly where, he said, she must have died of something in the lungs. I said, yes, she died of lung cancer. He drew exactly where the tumor mass was in her lungs. And the 2 dots at the base of the neck, he didn't fully understand, but I knew immediately. And nobody knew that information. It wasn't out in the public domain in anywhere. It was hidden in the records of the medical establishment. And they were, there are 2 lymph nodes at the base of the neck, and they were fully infected. And the reason that they could not save her life. He drew that on a piece of paper, and that got my attention.
Yeah.
And then he brought through 2 or 3 more facts right after that. And I'm sitting there, and this lightning bolt went up and down my spine. And I just said, excuse me, but this is what I said. I said, holy shit, she really is here, Yeah. And I knew she was in the room. And from that point on, for the next hour, we had probably the most profound conversation we'd had in 40 years. It's totally stunning to me, totally healing. It was fun. We laughed. It was poignant. We cried. It was just, it just was up. It was just an incredible conversation. And he was just the voice box. He was even using her language. She had tough language. First of all, Barbara was a stunningly beautiful woman. I met her in Berlin, Germany, when I was stationed there. I was drafted into the military in 1966 during Vietnam, and was sent to Berlin, Germany for a while, for a year. And I met Barbara the second month I was there. She had just gone over from Canada to work, and 3 weeks later, I asked her to marry me.
And you've shown me pictures. I mean, stunning doesn't...
She's a stunningly beautiful woman.
Doesn't
yes.
even come close. Like, stunning is an understatement. If you look like a movie star.
And she had just come off of a 2-year engagement with somebody, and she said, to the end, she said, I surprised myself and said yes.
Yeah.
And our marriage lasted 40 years with its normal ups and downs that marriages have. But the day she died, I could not have loved her more. I don't know how I could love a human being more than that. We did get along. We never had children, so it was just the 2 of us. We traveled a lot because of my work. And it just worked. And she died in my arms in a hospice. I was with her the last 2.5 weeks, 24/7 in her room. They set up a bed for me there. And we actually had an incredible time in the hospice. And she went into a coma the last 4 days. And then she passed away. I watched her body die. And but she was in my arms the last few minutes and took her last breath. I mean, I could go into a lot more detail of these, but
No, that's fine.
but it was a stunning moment for me. It was one of those moments that just is so impactful because it's full of tragedy in the sense that I've lost this woman I've spent 40 years with. But in another sense, it was enlightenment, it was learning, it was growth, she endeared me with a message about life and living life each day and just understanding that tomorrow's not guaranteed. And today is a day that we need to live and enjoy and to its fullest, no matter what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful lesson to get. Again, that was a year and a half after she died. I'd struggled up to that point, and I walked out of that office. I walked out of Ricky Wood's office a new person, really ready to move on with life. And every time she's come back, she's told me the same thing: continue moving on with your life. And so I have. 4 years later, I remarried a woman that we both knew, a woman that I never figured I'd have a relationship with, but life has its own way of bringing change. And so I ended up, I'd gone from Pennsylvania to Ohio right away. This was before I took up another relationship. I bought a house on a lake thinking that's where I was going to be the rest of my life because it was beautiful and it's something I'd always wanted. But the universe had other ideas, and I ended up selling that place and coming to California to be with my current wife.
And this whole transitional stage occurred when you were in your 60s, right?
Yes.
It's almost as though you have two very distinct lives. There's the whole world up until the loss of your wife, and then now you're in this beautiful location with this whole separate set of experiences. And it's sort of highlighting to me the whole, continue to live your life.
Continue to live your life. Continue moving on with your life is the message that has always come through from Barbara. It's usually the last thing that she will say. Sometimes I hear messages directly, but sometimes it's through others, other mediums. I don't go regularly. They really don't want you to come back regularly. I was really surprised, and this was another thing that validated Ricky to me, although I didn't need it at the end. He had brought through so much information and so accurately, using her tone of voice. I mean, one time I was having trouble understanding something, and Ricky jumped back like something startled him. And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, she just said, 'God damn it,' and Jesus Christ." And I said, "That's Barbara. That's the way she talked." And so it was so real. He could not have made this up. He couldn't have found this out. And so I didn't need more validation. But at the end, I said, "Can I come back and do this again?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, they don't recommend it." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because they know that you need to move on. And if you keep coming back here, you're not going to be moving on the way you need to be moving on."
In this case, then they would be those that have passed that the medium is channeling, ostensibly.
Say again?
They, in this case, then would be those that were being channeled by the medium.
Spirits that are around us all the time.
Okay.
Yes, they know. I mean, they're family, friends, guides. We have a whole cast of characters that surround us. It's one of the things I know now, because even after that, I had much more even dramatic experiences that she had to come back once again a few years later to club me over the head when I was starting to doubt. My engineering mind, I was alone, woke up one night and sat up in bed and was starting to doubt everything that I had experienced up to that point, and literally found myself a month later at a conference I knew nothing about. It was called the Afterlife Awareness Conference in Portland, Oregon. I was living in California with Nance at the time. Nance was away visiting her mother. And I had that thought in the middle of the night. And I think our logical minds do this at times. They come in because of the filters that have been imposed upon us since birth. Our mind starts to go through this rationalization of this can't really be, even though everything that I'd learned up to that point was showing me. So I realized there's a difference between thinking something, believing something, and knowing something.
Agreed.
And they're different. And I was believing in an afterlife because of what I experienced with Ricky and some other experiences. But then I was starting to doubt. And when I found myself at that conference, it was a phenomenal 3.5-day experience. I mean, literally one day, Nance and I are sitting reading in our house that we were renting in Sausalito, California. And the next day we were attending a conference we knew nothing about. And I'm skipping over the details of how that happened, but it was lined up. We end up at this conference, which was marvelous. And the second day of the conference, I'm walking through the vendor area, and I didn't want anything necessarily, but I was just curious, and there were some mediums in there that were invited. And I stopped at the table of one of the young mediums, and I was asking her about her life, and she started to tell me when all of a sudden she turned around like somebody tapped her on her right shoulder, just like you would normally respond, and her head turned around that way. She ignored it. She continued talking to me. It happened again. She turned around. She looked back again to me. Now she had this look on her face like she was a little disturbed, but continued talking to me. The third time it happened, she turned around, and to this void space behind her, she said, all right, all right. And she turned back to me and she says, do you know somebody by the name of Barbara?
Good Lord.
Yeah, well, that's what I felt. It was like, you punched me in the face, but I chuckled. I know Barbara, and I know what a drive she has if she wants something. So I said, yes, that's my deceased wife. And Allison, the medium, she said, well, she's very determined, isn't she? See, because she was a little perturbed. And I've since learned that mediums can, to avoid being bothered by spirits 24/7, can put out boundaries. But this spirit was not honoring any boundaries at all. She was just punching through. And so Allison said, well, she's got some things she wants to tell you. And she says, I don't normally do it like this. It was a busy room, people coming and going, noisy. But she says, if you want, I'll share what she wants to tell you. And I said, absolutely. And for the next 15 minutes, Barbara told me everything that was going on in my life. And again, removing certain anxieties that I was dealing with in the moment at the time. And she usually finds a way to come through when I'm experiencing some anxiety, and just literally completely removing it.
Are there any high-level elements of the communications that help you to alleviate the anxieties? What is it about what she's saying that helps you through those moments? Because it's fascinating, by the way, that this woman who has been dead for, at this point, 18 years?
Well, no. At this point, this was 2014. She died in 2008. So
okay.
It was about 6
years. Okay.
Yeah.
And yet she knew, this medium was talking with her and knew all the things that were happening in your life at that point.
Absolutely.
That's wild, right? Again, coming at this world in through a very similar lens to your own, working in a very math-driven, materially driven role in my work, and then having experiences, it is difficult to square that circle at times. And so that pulling back and saying, I don't know if I believe this, is very natural to me. So I resonate with that explicitly, and also very curious what those messages were that brought you back from anxiety.
Well, specifically, when I decided to be with Nan, when I moved to the lake in Ohio, I ended up being 20 minutes away from my brother and his family, which is the first we've been that close in many years. And it was good. My nephews, we were having a great time on the lake, and it was just a beautiful setup. And I told people I was going to die in that home, and so they thought I was going to be there for years. And when I decided to be with Nance, and that was another experience, when I was driving out after I started to date her, I was driving my car on this one trip from Ohio to California, and I was halfway across Nebraska, and long straight stretch of interstate highway with cornfields on either side. I kind of went into what they call highway hypnosis. Perfectly okay with what I was doing, but my mind was, relaxed and calm. And all of a sudden I heard a voice, and I was in anxiety. I back up. I was a little bit of anxiety because I didn't know whether Nancy and I would live in California. We were going to live in Ohio. I didn't want to leave the lake. She didn't want to leave California. It was another one of those anxiety decision-making points that I just didn't know how to resolve. And all of a sudden in that highway hypnosis, I heard a voice. It wasn't Barbara's voice. It was a male voice, very low, calm voice, and it said, "You're moving." And I woke up out of that hypnotic state I was sort of in, and I looked around. An empty car, and I'm looking around, and I argued. I said, "I'm not moving." I don't know who the heck I was arguing with, but I just argued. I said, "I'm not moving. I've got this great house back on the lake that I've always wanted." And then the voice came back, calmer, and it was a voice of all-knowing. I don't know how to describe that. And it just said, "You're moving." And in that moment, and this is getting to what you were asking, it's like someone had wiped a magic wand up and down my body, completely removing all indecision, all anxiety. It was gone, and I knew I was moving.
Yeah.
And I called Nance immediately, told her I was coming, sort of freaked her out a little bit.
Yeah.
And I called a realtor. I mean, there were other things. My sister was living with me temporarily, but she was going to go back to Colorado. My brother didn't want the house for the summer and the boat and all that. I mean, everything lined up. And so I called the realtor and I said, let's sell the house. And he said, you understand it's taking 275 days to sell a home like yours on this lake right now. This was in 2012, June. And I said, it doesn't matter. You see, because it doesn't matter because I knew somehow it was incorporated in me a knowing that this was right. This was what I'm doing. And everything lined up. And within a month, 4 days later, the perfect buyer walked in. He said 275 days. 4 days later, the perfect buyer walked in and bought the house for exactly what I wanted for it. And then brought people in to help buy things that I was going to. I ended up moving to California at the end of the month. I mean, I got rid of the boats that I bought, the toys, everything within a month. And I moved to California a month later with a car and 2 suitcases. And I never felt lighter in my life. And it all just lined up. And I say that because one of the great lessons I've learned as an engineer who wants to control everything
Yes.
is to let go of control. You do your part. I mean, I had to do my part in all that. But then I didn't worry about whether something was going to happen, whether the boat was going to sell or this was going to sell, my second car was going to sell. I didn't worry about any of that because it just all lined up and happened. And that was the part of the training process for me that I've learned with time is to do your part and then let go and trust that there are forces around you that are going to help line up things for you.
I've been meeting a lot of folks lately who are very good at just sort of living with the flow and the understanding that the world will take care of you. But boy, sometimes I would love to just have a voice show up and say, no, JT, this is how it's going to happen. Just accept it. I sometimes wonder if folks with structured thinking the way you and I seem to have, maybe we need somebody to hit us over the head a little bit.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Barbara hit me over the head. She knew me well. I mean, my goodness, we were married for 40 years and starting at the age of 20. And so we grew up as adults knowing each other. And she knew me and she knew I needed facts. And she knew in this case, I needed to be hit over the head. She didn't want me sitting up in bed at night doubting that this was real. And I led into that story when we were talking about beliefs and knowing. That experience with Allison Gannon, the medium that made that happen, was that was the moment in which my belief in an afterlife, my belief in what's in the non-physical world moved to a knowing.
Yeah.
And I tell people, and I usually hold up my fingers about 3 inches apart in one hand like I'm holding something, and I say, this is what I know. These are the things I know for sure. And then I take my hands and I hold them about 2 feet apart and I say, these are the things that I believe. Mm-hmm. And then the things that I think about that are unknown yet, I can't make my arms wide enough on that. So most of what we talk about in this whole subject of what comes next and the non-physical world is in that we don't really know. And so what we do is we share information, like in our meditation group. The Monroe Institute has done lots of research over the last 50 years in this and has tons of information. And so we're learning more about what this means. In the scientific community, I had to understand it from a science point of view. Yeah. That's who I am. And I haven't taken thermodynamics in college. The first thing you learn in thermodynamics is the first rule of thermodynamics is you cannot kill energy.
Yeah, essentially.
There's tremendous energy in this body, in the cells and the atoms and the electrons and molecules. There's tremendous energy in there. So what happens when the body dies? Where does that energy go? It has to go somewhere.
The information is still there.
That's another big one. And it's hard for us to grasp that information's out there. Oh boy, this could lead into so many stories.
Let's go, Peter.
Well, when you said, the information and the information's out there, everything that's ever been known is out there. It's like universal knowledge. There's different words. I think there's a term called Akashic records.
Yep.
That also describes that, but the information's out there. And I had an experience in my 30s. I had 3 experiences in my 30s that I've never been able to duplicate. These were spontaneous. They were out-of-body experiences. One at age 32, the first time I ever smoked marijuana, the only time I've ever smoked marijuana, sitting in a lounge chair, and all of a sudden I stood up and I walked around behind the chair, and all of a sudden I looked at me, sitting in the chair, and that scared me. It was the first time I thought I died, but I wasn't sure I was dead. I mean, obviously I was not dead yet. I'm just looking at my body. And so I tiptoed back around the front of the chair and gently sat back down in my body. I don't know if I ever told anybody about that, not even Barbara. To this day, I can't remember telling anybody about that, but it got my attention.
And that's a way more measured response to a first-time out-of-body experience than I hear from a lot of other folks who describe their first time. They don't just say, oh, I should go sit back down in my body. I hear a lot of people freaking out and being terrified. And so kudos on the measured response without having any training or experience or exposure to this.
I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do?
I didn't know what to do. I thought, can I get back in that body? I really want to go back in that body. I'm 32 years old. And then, of course, reading Robert Monroe's first book, in which he talked about it in his 40s, having his first couple out-of-body experiences, also experiencing fear, also going to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and his family doctor for a full medical exam to see if he's okay, and getting validation that you're just fine. And then finding a way and a modality to induce out-of-body experiences for himself, and having, I don't know what it was, a couple, 300 out-of-body experiences over a period of years, and copiously documenting those experiences. That was the beginning of the Monroe Institute. And I've never been able to self-induce an out-of-body experience that I know of, but those three, the other two were under stress.
Yeah.
Sudden stress. And this is where I was going back with the Akashic Records, the universal knowledge. The first of those, I had joined Toastmasters because in the work, I started a business, and the work that I was doing, I needed to public speak. I was terribly afraid of public speaking. Barbara said, go. She pushed me, got me to go, and it was very useful. But early on, they had given me one night, I don't know, they picked me, they usually pick 3 or 4 people and just randomly hand out a little note of a piece of paper with a topic scrolled on it, and it was called Table Topics. Once they give it to you, you have just a few seconds to look it over and then stand and begin speaking on it. It's to help you to understand more about spontaneous speaking. And I felt fairly competent until I opened up the piece of paper and saw this was a topic that I totally disagreed with, and I was supposed to defend it.
Beautiful.
And it was Robert's Rules of Order, which is a formal way of running meetings, which I totally disagreed with. And I looked at that and I panicked. And I believe, and this is a summation on my part, that my mind went into a wavelength, a frequency that was enabling to me leaving the body. And I immediately stepped out of my body a few feet away and watched. Now I say I stepped out.
Yeah.
I was in the non-physical. It was a spirit part of me, I guess, but I was a non-physical entity comprised of energy and frequency and all that, but nobody could see that. And I watched me. I watched Peter, the body, and here's where this dips into the knowledge.
Right.
As soon as that happened, both of us went calm.
Yeah.
Calmer than I am in my usual daily life, believe it or not. Very calm. And my mind opened up. And the body, Peter, began speaking on this topic so beautifully and authoritatively that within the 2 minutes that I was asked to speak on it, when I sat down, I mean, the group just stood up and gave me a round of applause. I mean, it was really that good.
Nice.
On a subject I knew not how to defend. So to this day, I ask myself the question, where did that come from?
Absolutely.
And as I understand more of what you just said about universal knowledge and it's all out there, somehow my being tapped into that body of knowledge and was able to defend this.
And the experience of you watching yourself do that, the first thing it inspires in me hearing it is the idea that maybe it was just getting out of the way and getting your conscious mind out of the way to allow the information in.
Oh, that's big. That's
right?
Big what you just said. You're absolutely right.
That's what it feels like. That's sort of the instinctive response I get.
I think you're right. When we went calm, when you go calm like that, you become, I don't know.
I think a conduit.
Yeah, you just open up. You just open up to that body of knowledge. And some of this, and understand that I go back to what I think about, what I believe, and what I know. A lot of this I don't know for sure, is still speculation on my part, but as I try to sort through these and figure out, well, how did that happen? This is the only thing I'm coming up with at this point, but it sure makes sense as I learn more and more. I'm so blessed to be surrounded by people, particularly people who have had experiences like this, the Monroe Institute and what have you. And we explore these topics and share, and it's just, it's very, very healthy and very enlightening, expansive.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the frustrating elements to me is essentially that it is so, I don't know how to replicate these things personally. I don't know how to say, let's enter that. We can all talk about a flow state where it doesn't even feel like you're trying. You're just moving through and things are working and you're finding ideas and inspiration. But to replicate an experience like you just described, where stress-induced, I don't know, let's pretend we can make a word for this, stress-induced observer experience, where now you are in two places observing your physical self responding in a way which everybody saw and loved, but it didn't feel as though you were the one doing it. How can you replicate that? How can you test that? How can you confirm that through any scientific process? And I don't have an answer for that. I mean, we've discussed this briefly. Part of that is why I went back to the Monroe Institute to do the Discover program, where I think I've described this in the past, but they put an EEG on your head and they scan brain waves while you're doing various meditative states and having experiences. And it's fascinating, but it doesn't tell me the mechanism other than to say that there are different waveforms or brain waves or frequencies that are in more or less relationship to each other. It's more of just an observation that something is happening, but none of the mechanisms get to really be isolated in that way. So I'm constantly torn between this materialist left brain, as I use my right hand, mindset and approach to this, and just sort of accepting that, hey, we don't know everything, but that doesn't make it not real, to double the negative.
I don't know how to answer that. I think it's an exploration for each of us. And I think we're all led on different paths. Not to say that the modalities aren't the same, but we're led in different ways to get there. I'm not a reader of books.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm surrounded by people who are readers of books. And that, just as a quick aside, I never understood that because I grew up in a family of avid readers, and I wasn't the reader. I was the one going out the door, experiencing life in a different way.
Yeah.
That's how I learn. I'm very tactile, very observant, very visual. And I've questioned it. I still continue to question it. Why is that? But I happened to come in, I was in the company of a light reader, a gentleman that called himself a light reader. And basically what he did, he says, your whole history exists in your aura. And I don't know whether I believed that at the time or not, but I'm open.
Sure.
And I guess I'm going to use that word again because being open is a key to a lot of this.
I largely agree. Yes.
Our filters will close us off, and we have to somehow get beyond our filters and just be open. Nobody's saying you have to believe it yet, but just be open to it. And I think the more open we are, then the more we begin to see, the more that comes to us. And where was I headed with that? What was I talking about when I led into that openness? Just be open.
Getting out of the way, just experiencing.
Shoot, there was an experience I had around that I wanted to come back to, but
The light reader?
yes, thank you. It was the light. And it had to do with me reading books.
Yeah.
And after I'd been through an hour with him and was blown away at what he was able to pull out of my art as a history of my life, I just blurted out a question. I said, I've got another question. I said, why don't I read?
Oh,
Given that I
love that you asked that. That's great.
Yeah, it's a crazy question, but it just blurted it out. I'd never asked that in my life. And here I am halfway through my adult life, and I'm asking that question to this guy. And he looked at my aura. He looked at it, and he just smiled, and he came back. He says, oh, this is easy.
Oh, no, I have a thought. Go ahead.
In a previous life, you were living in a monastery-like environment, translating documents by candlelight,
Oh, no.
and you just burned out.
Yeah, you're
He
done.
says, you don't want to have anything to do with reading. I says, you're right.
That's
Now,
funny.
the people may laugh at that, and you hear me laughing at it.
Yeah,
but
totally.
I've never had a better explanation as to why I can't pick up a book.
Yeah.
I mean, in reality,
Sure.
yes, after Barbara died and I had the experience with Ricky, I couldn't find enough books for myself on spirit communication. I've wanted to understand, because I know they can hear us. My question was always, how can I hear them better? And so this last 18 years has been really a dedication to try to understand the process of how I can hear them more directly.
I think, although you said you don't know how to answer my question, I think you did, though. I think you actually answered my question in a way that
I don't even remember
makes
what your
sense.
question was.
Oh, that's fair. Hey, welcome to Conversation with Me. It was essentially around sort of reconciling the two aspects of life and being able to realize or recognize the reality of the experience that we can't quantify and measure.
You mean the two aspects of life, being
Yes.
physical and non-physical?
Correct.
Yeah.
And the lack of capacity to measure and structure the non-physical experience. And I think you answered it almost immediately by saying, you just go experience it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was gifted with those three experiences.
Absolutely.
I was gifted with that. Monroe teaches you in the Gateway, the initial training there, the 1 week long training, how to do that, how to induce an out of body. But they will tell you right up front that only about 15% of the people who attend the session are able to do it at the session, even with 4 meditations a day for 7 days. You know, it's a practice. I asked one of the trainers and I said, how long did it take you? He says, it took me a year of practicing before I could begin to initiate my own out-of-body experiences. So it's possible. I am perhaps not as disciplined but I'm also getting messages because I do, in the last 2.5 years, I've begun to do journaling. And I've found that that's my most receptive modality to being able to communicate with the non-physical world. And I get beautiful stuff that helps me tremendously through that. And I've asked about this, and they are telling me now, you know everything you need to know for now and to live an abundant life in this journey that you're on now. Yeah. Investigate to satisfy your curiosity.
Yes.
And to have fun with it, but know that you know everything you need to know right now. And so it doesn't put a huge pressure on me to learn some of the, to go out of body on my own. It doesn't put a great pressure on me, and that's good.
And you and I both know several folks who that is a primary motivation.
Oh,
they want to desperately get out of body, and that's good for them. That's their path. And I've been there. I've actively sought that experience, and now it's more of a let's enjoy the experience. To the point you were making, like the joy is in the investigation. It's in the journey. Once you get there, you're still gonna want to explore. Now just explore something else.
Yes.
Because this whole experience of life is literally an exploration.
Oh man. One of the sides of me that I like most.
That's a great statement.
I can't believe I'm saying it that way, but is that I'm very practical. And I always upset people when I tell them I think I have a very simple mind. I want to understand things in their simplest form. But the practical side of me wants to take this information that I've learned. I mean, what's it mean that spirits are out there? What's it mean that Barbara's here, probably sitting in the chair next to me, having a cigarette and a drink, or my mother's sitting over here, or my dad's sitting over there, or my guide, I have spirit guides. And, they're probably in the room right now, nudging us to talk about one thing or another. I mean, that happens all the time.
I should take up less space on this couch. I feel like I'm crowding them out.
It's probably a crowded room right now. So where was I going with that? Oh, what's the practical side of that for me? The practical side is I ask them for help when I need it. They nudge me. They encourage me. I'll struggle with something, and I can just give you practical examples again and again and again. And when we sold our previous house or our condo, and at a time when they told us you can't sell a condo at Christmas time, we said, yeah, we got to, and we're going to. And it happened, literally made a decision at the beginning of December to sell the house, and this house was sold by the end of December to the perfect buyer. But I can remember after the first open house, the first weekend after we decided, and we had 5 offers on this house that blew us away. They were just wonderful offers, but they were all based upon loans, which we all need to get if we don't have the money. And because we wanted to get out fast, I knew a cash offer would be great. So I said to my spirits on Sunday night, I said, thank you for these offers, and it looks like this is all going to happen. But boy, it would be just great if we got a cash offer to just move this along faster.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here the next morning, the realtor called and he says, we got one more offer and it's a cash offer.
Of course it
Now,
was.
I don't know. People listening would say, okay, well, it's coincidence, it's a coincidence. But even somebody that studied statistics, probability statistics as I have, when these things are happening on a fairly regular basis,
Yeah.
I mean, weekly, daily sometimes, it goes way beyond
Yeah.
probability. The odds are just astronomical that something like that would happen on a regular basis. And for me, they're happening on a regular basis. So I've just come to the body of evidence tells me, yeah, there's something real out there.
Yeah.
Hiking, Nance and I wanted to go on a hike one day in Big Bear, California when we lived there. And the night before, my hip was hurting so badly, I just about fell down when I was doing some work. And I told her I didn't know if I'd be able to take the hike. Next day, I woke up, felt better. We decided to take the hike. A quarter mile into the hike, my hip is so bad, I'm limping and limping harder. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do a 7-mile hike in rocky territory at 7,000 feet. And so she stopped to get a drink. I walked another 50 yards and I stopped. And this is the practical side now. I asked my guides, I said, actually in the form of a statement, I said, I don't know whether I'm supposed to take this hike today or not, but I'd really love to take this hike. The weather's perfect. The conditions are perfect. I'd love to take this hike. However, I'm okay with whatever is whatever is indicated here, because I don't know if I'm not supposed to take the hike. I don't know what's down that trail. Maybe there's something that's, that I don't want to encounter. I don't know whether I'm supposed to take this hike or not. So whatever you tell me, whatever you indicate to me, I'm good with.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a contrived acceptance. That was a real acceptance.
Yes.
And that was learned. I had to learn that over the previous years, to trust that. With the very next step I took, I'm going to get emotional as I think about this. It's an emotional joy. But the very next step, the pain was gone completely. And it has never come back. That was, I don't know, that was 2016. Now, I don't know the science involved in that.
Yeah.
Frankly, I don't care.
Yeah.
All I know is I was experiencing real pain with that hip. I had been experiencing pain on some hikes with that hip. In that moment, I opened up and I just said, hey, whatever's indicated, I'm okay with, because I trust you. I trust that you've given me good guidance. And with the next step, it was gone and never come back. And I don't know how to explain all that. I just know that it happened. Now, when you have these kinds of experiences, one after the other, you just begin to trust it. And so today it's a normal part of my life to ask for help and know that help is there and trust it.
There's an element of that story that brings to mind the idea of releasing attachment to outcome. And I think the key moment to me in what you just stated was when you basically said, I don't need to do this, but I'd really like to, but it's okay with me if I don't. And I've had friends who are in various disciplines of however you want to describe this non-physical element of life, who have been hounding me for years to release my attachment to outcome. And I don't know if that was something, you mentioned that's something you had been practicing or working
Yes.
toward. Was that the moment where it finally felt embodied to you or realized?
Yes, it was one of those clear moments, and I thought about it as it happened. I thought, oh my God, I really am comfortable detaching myself from the outcome, because that would not have been Peter years before. Peter would have really wanted to take that walk. And can you help me out with this? Can you, I would have done everything I could to influence the decision in that direction. But, I just ask people to think about their lives and think about the decision. I mean, Garth Brooks has a song that he sang, thank God for unanswered prayers.
Not super familiar with that, but that's an interesting statement.
It's a story about him he had a girlfriend in high school, he wanted to marry her, and they didn't marry. And then years later, when he was married to the woman that he should marry, not the one that that's what the song is based on. But it's true. We don't know. We don't know what's down the road. We don't know the total implications of decisions we make.
Yeah.
We make decisions. Sometimes it's really bad and there's a bad outcome. Sometimes there's a good outcome, but we get attached to a decision. And I like that, the way you put that, detachment from the outcome.
Yeah. I wish I could lay claim to that. I think it's been framed to me
It's
so many
probably,
times.
well,
Yeah. And I'm sort of reflecting on this as well, because there are different ways I think I could look at this. And one of those is, one could look at this and say, well, you're just trying to avoid disappointment. You don't want to put a stake in the ground around what you do want. You're not willing to go chase it. But I don't think that's what this is. I think it's more of an acceptance of what will come to pass is going to come to pass. I can work toward a thing, but I have to be willing to acknowledge that it might not occur the way I expect it to. So we can want whatever it is we want in this life. It'll get there. Just might not be the path we expect. And hey, you got to take the hike.
Maybe there's a different path that you're supposed to take entirely.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a suggestion there that there's a plan of sorts underlying that statement.
In this area of thinking stuff, not belief or knowing yet, but still in the thinking stuff, I hear a lot, and I've heard a lot through the years, that there are some big things that we want to learn in this journey. I mean, the out of body showed me that the body is just the body. I now look at, I take care of this body as best I can, and it's doing pretty well for 78 years. But this is Pete's rent-a-body.
Yeah, I like that.
In this journey.
Yeah.
I cherish it. I take care of it, but it's my rent-a-body. This is one of probably many journeys I've had in the past and many I'm going to have in the future. I don't know. But what I seem to understand is before we come back, there's some big things we kind of want to learn maybe on this journey. And we say, this is something I really want to get. I heard an NDE story, near-death experience story recently where this woman got really banged up. I mean, her body was just banged up in every way, shape, or form. She got run over in her bike by a car, and she had gone out of body and was going through what a lot of near-death people experience, looking at their lives and walking through that with a guide. And before they come back, it can be minutes, just a couple minutes, or it can be a little longer in that death experience. But they learn so much. And she said, she asked the guide, because she knew she was going to come back into this body that was now totally beat up, was going to take lots of therapy and what they could. She said, why did I have to get so beat up? And the guide said, well, we tried to get your attention about 3 other times.
Oh, man.
And with each time it would get more, but it was kind of like,
it's hard to get your attention.
You had to get your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the big things we learn is to start to listen. What are we hearing? What are we hearing from ourselves, our own intuition? Or is it our own intuition? Or are we hearing signals from beyond, from our friends, from our relatives, from our guides? They're trying to say something to us and we're just not listening. Oh man, I've got experience. I've got stories around those too, listening. Barbara used to tell me in life, listen. And then
pay attention.
And then in the afterlife, I've heard her very dramatically tell me, listen, listen. And so today I listen. I had to work on it. I had to practice. And now it's more of a natural. If I hear something strongly, I'll pass it on. If I'm in a conversation and I hear something that I need to say, I'll just say it.
Yeah. I was discussing something along those lines with my mom maybe a couple of weeks ago. Essentially, something that's occurred to me frequently in life is I will have dreams about people and they'll just show up. I haven't seen them, haven't thought about them in 5, 10, 20 years. And my inclination is, oh, I should see how they're doing. And time and again, when I reach out and say, hey, just had a dream about this, or hey, just saw this thing and it made me think of you or someone that we knew, how are you doing? It's always exactly the right moment to reach out to that person. Something that occurred to me very recently. I know this isn't about me, this is about you, Peter, but I was going through and packing some things up at my old place. And I found a couple of pages of notes that I had taken while helping a now deceased friend through some things, right? He passed away from ALS, still seems to be around for whatever reason. I found the papers, reached out to his brother, and his brother said, hey, today was his birthday. And I had no clue. I'm not good at that, but we talked a little bit about this at coffee before we started taping, but it's this sort of practice of noticing. And if you maybe not get out of the way as dramatically as you did in your Toastmasters experience, but if you can get out of the way or let yourself pay attention to the things that are occurring around you, you're gonna hear exactly like Barbara keeps telling you to pay attention, listen. These little hints at what's important start to show up. And if you pay attention and notice them, maybe you act on them and maybe it helps you, maybe it helps somebody else around you. maybe it helps somebody you didn't even know needed help or support or gives love.
Oh my
And that's
goodness.
the most beautiful response to these experiences of my life. And we talked about, you and I talked about this a couple of times now, but I talk about this with everybody. Love seems to be the most important aspect of all of this.
It's the basis of everything. Yes.
You put it beautifully, I don't know, maybe an hour ago, 2 hours ago, I don't even know what day it is. Choose love.
Choose love. Always choose love.
Always choose love.
Yeah, that's one of the 4 mantras on the back of my bedroom door. And that came to me in a journal. My sister was dying last summer, and I spent 6 weeks, well, 5 weeks with her, 6 weeks total, but 5 weeks with her until she died in 2 visits. And in the middle of those 2 visits, I was going to come back for a couple months, but then something that first week when I was back here said, go back. And I didn't want to go back that soon. And I was really struggling with that. And to the point of anxiety building, when I always point to my shoulders. It's like you got these little miniature Peters standing on each shoulder. One says, go back now. The other one says, no, you don't need to go.
Yeah.
And so the anxiety was building. And so late one night, I did a journal and I said, I need some help with this. I'm struggling. I don't know whether to go back or not. And this, I don't know what entity came through. I have no idea, but I started writing and for your benefit, I'll write my question down on my pad and then draw a line. And then I put an A for answer.
Yeah.
And the very first word I hear, I write down, regardless of what comes into my mind. I write that word down, and then the next word, and then a phrase, and then a sentence, and then pretty much it's just flowing from that point on. I'm just writing what I'm hearing. And basically throughout the body of that page and a half of writing, it was very clear to me I was going to go back. And by the time I got to the end of that part, I knew exactly what I had to do. There was no question in my mind. The anxiety was gone. A decision was made. I'm going. And then I said, is there anything else I need to know here? I just threw out one more question. And what came back to me was, always choose love.
God, I love that.
Now, I've heard that before. Nancy used to have that. She used to have choose love on her license plate. I mean, I've heard this so many times, but in that moment, it was so impactful because of everything else that transpired in that journal that I decided to make that one of my mantras now that I want to be constantly reminded of.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. The basis of all of this is love. So
It seems to be.
You hit right the nail on the head.
Yeah. I'm learning that every day, every single day. And it's one of those things that every once in a while I have to be smacked about the face and head with, hey, dummy. I'm very positive when I talk to myself. I'm getting better at this, Peter.
I can relate.
The joys of humanity is, hey, you're loved. You're accepted. This all matters. Just remember that it's going to be okay. And not to turn this into one of those sessions, but it's very important, I think. And I don't say this lightly, like recognizing love in this experience and in this world allows for so much more in the experience. I don't know that I can put this into appropriate words, which is the burden of existence for me. Always trying to find the right words, but the importance and the benefit of continuing to choose love in decision making and taking that as the priority doesn't always make the most logical, reasonable sense. Definitely doesn't always make the most financial sense. But at the end of the day, I've never regretted a decision made from love.
This is a whole beautiful subject unto itself, actually. And the thing that kept coming to me as you were talking just now about that was one of the great beauties. I think it's a law of the universe. I think, we even haven't even used the God word yet in this, I think in this conversation. I don't know what God is. I was taught one thing as a youngster, and now I understand in myself that I don't totally know what it means. But I believe that there is a universal spirit, that there are universal laws of, behavior or living or whatever that govern. And one of the beautiful laws of the universe, as I interpret it for myself, is that what we give out in life, we get back. It's this give and take, and what you present to the world comes back to you. And I have proven that to myself over and over again for many, many, many years. And that leads into, there's a whole book on that subject that I could write.
Probably.
Of what comes back when you live in a way where you honor other people, you don't just accept them for who they are, you honor them for who they are. I mean, I used to say, I accept people for who they are. No, no, no. I honor people for who they are. And when you approach human beings, complete strangers, with this feeling inside, and I'll say a feeling of love,
Yeah.
you radiate a different energy, a different vibrational frequency that people get. And I think everybody I talk to says, yeah, you know when you come in contact with somebody that you just feel in sync with.
Yes.
And you also know when you're coming in contact with somebody that you're totally not in sync with.
You're going to have some
And
struggles.
You feel that resistance. It's like two magnets that put in the wrong direction and they're repelling each other.
Yeah.
You just feel it. And there's sciences I think we haven't fully discovered yet in our universe. I think there's probably many sciences that have not been discovered yet. But I think this is one that you could probably validate in some scientific, materialistic way, because we all experience this.
Yeah. Just because we lack the capacity to measure these things doesn't make them immeasurable or unmeasurable. Yeah. It just means we haven't figured out how yet. And I think we'll get there.
I used to drive around a Volkswagen Vanagon, a 25-year-old Vanagon that Nancy and I bought a couple of years after I moved out here to be with her, and she wanted to do a kindness program. I hate to use the word program. It wasn't a program, but it was just doing kindness acts. And so we ended up, us and school children and others, painting 100 kindness slogans on this Volkswagen Vanagon, and it was beautiful. Multicolored slogans on every inch of this outside of the exterior of this thing. And I got to tell you, I never felt more love than when I was driving that van. Yeah. I mean, when you're driving down the street and people are giving you thumbs up and smiles and rolling down their window and thanking you, and I go into a hardware store and I come back out and 2 or 3 people are reading the van or, leaving money on the seat or gifts, crystal. I mean, they're leaving different things, gifts on this vehicle. Or watching a mother and a child standing there reading it, and the mother saying to her child, her 10-year-old child, "This is what we're going to do when we go home." Seeing another person crying one time, and I said, "What? Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah." He says, "I'm reading this one thing here by the Dalai Lama." And he said, "I know what I'm going to." He says, my partner and I have been having a problem." He says, "I know exactly now what I'm going to do when I go home." That van radiated love, and this is what we can do as human beings. We radiate what's inside of us to the rest of the world, and what a gift right now in our horrible political climate and the stress in the world and tension in the world. People say, "What can I do?" I say, you can do a lot. You don't know how powerful that vibration is, how many people you're going to affect, and then they're going to affect, and they're going to affect. There's a ripple effect.
There is.
It's big.
And I believe it's compounding. I believe each of us can do small things. And I'm not going to lay claim to a capacity to go and solve the problems right now, but you and I and anyone else can just go out and start making small changes. There was an organization I was a part of in college called ISAC. And essentially the premise, and sorry to anybody else who knows this better than I do, the premise is you can change the ocean, one drop at a time. You just start filling a bucket and you put that bucket into the ocean, and just small changes over time add up. You're not going to change the whole ocean all at once. You can't change its composition, but you can add to it in small measures, and over time it's going to have a massive effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll figure that out later, but yeah.
Well, it's candles, the idea of the candle too. Candle's not, one candle doesn't seem to be a lot of energy, but you can light somebody else's candle and then they light another candle and another candle. And, one candle started all of that. And you don't know the impact that you can have as a human being. I think, again, going back to near-death experiences, you hear people talk about that they were shown the good things that they had done in their life and the things that they could have done a lot better, or the things that they shouldn't have done. But particularly in those that where they did something, they said something nice to someone one day, they're shown that as a short video, let's say, an instantaneous video. But then they're also shown the ripple effect of that, where it went. Who else got touched because you touched one person that day? And that compounding effect startled them as they talked about it. And they said, "I didn't realize I had that much."
I haven't spoken about this much with anybody. I've maybe told 2 people. About 3 months ago, I was having a rough day, let's say. And all of a sudden, everything fell away, and I was shown exactly what you just described. The little moments, the little impacts that I had had on people, and the way it compounded, and the number of people that I had affected or impacted with those positive moments. And it was sort of as though somebody was, again, smacking me about the head and neck, saying, JT, it's okay. Look at what you've done. Look at the impact you've had on these people for the positive. Embrace that and remember that's part of who you are.
Mm.
And I mean, I'm not saying this in a pat myself on the back
I understand.
kind of way, but it's an experience that happens. And I don't know how to explain it or describe it better than what I just did, but the impact that it had on me in that moment pulled me right back up and out. And I realized I didn't need to be feeling the way that I was, because there's so much more that's more important. And it's those small acts over time, so much more impactful.
Boy, just think of what we're talking about and then relate back to, I don't know how many people I come in contact with right now in what year is this, 2025?
It's 2025. Somehow we made it.
That are so bewildered by the happenings that are going on in the world and certainly in this country, and they don't know what to do about it. And this is something they can do about it.
Yeah.
This is something they have control over every day. Just walking down the street, smile at the next person that walks by you. Just a smile, that's an act of kindness. Be nice to a cashier as you're checking out. I mean, there's just so many things that we can do just by being kind. And that has an enormous ripple effect. My hope is that enough people begin to learn these things that it becomes a tipping point, what they call a tipping point, that it just takes over the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
It may sound Pollyannish and optimistic, but it has to start somewhere.
It's not the worst thing to be in life. A little optimistic.
Oh,
you're going to feel
Mr.
better.
Practical here.
Yeah, I know. And you're talking to, Mr. Frequently Negative over here. Working through it. Yeah, practicality is great. It gets things done. There's an effectiveness to it. And we should, I believe, all strive to be effective. And also, we get to choose the way we approach the world in being effective. And frankly, being positive and filled with joy and spreading love seems more effective to me.
One of the gifts of my life and career, as an engineer, I'll give you an example of what we're talking about. In 1983, I was assigned to a project, a silicon wafer manufacturing facility redo. It was an upgrade and a very difficult project. And we were asked to do a program that involved the workers more in the thinking process. Don't just let the engineers and the designers and all that do all the work. It's get the people that are out there building the thing involved in it. And it made a lot of sense. It made a lot of practical sense, although I didn't know the mechanics, but I was put in charge of it as a secondary duty to me being the project engineer. And it just kind of took on a life of its own. Again, in fact, the first book I ever wrote had a big section on this in there because it was pivotal in a lot of my development change. I understand this is a young engineer, really, or I think I was 28, 29 years old, 30 years old, maybe in that range. And we were making changes to this project that in what you listen to an idea from a worker that gives you an idea that's going to improve the way the work is done, you're going to take and do something with that. Mm-hmm. The deal is that most workers have these things every day, but nobody ever asks them. So we were starting to ask, and we formalized it, and we did all kinds of things, and we did recognition, and it was getting so good that we had to start doing some kind of recognition. It led to that. You have to find a way to thank these people. So that we started doing recognition dinners. And so months into this process, doing a recognition dinner, and where you invite, you send a letter to their homes and invite them and their spouses to a dinner in their honor on a Friday night. And these guys that are in hard hats all day long and coveralls come dressed in three-piece suits, and their wives are all dressed up, and we give them roses and have a really nice fun. We roasted some of the guys, just had a little fun with it. And then, oh boy, I don't know if I could tell this properly without getting my emotions wrapped up in this, but we had a crew of ironworkers one time that did a phenomenal piece of work, and we invited them to a dinner and in their honor and sent the letters out and all that. And the following Monday morning, I'm walking through the plant area, and I came across one of the workers from that crew, one of the older workers, and he was kind of quiet. And I said, "Jerry, is everything okay? Did wife have a good time? Did you ever? He says, oh yeah. He says, yeah. He said, I said, everything okay? Because I can just detect there was something emotional going on there. And he said, well, he says, you know those letters that you sent to our homes? I said, yes. This was all new for us, so I was
Right.
all ears. He said, the day I got home, he said, my wife had the letter in her hands. She greeted me at the door. She had the letter in her hands and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, Jerry, you've been an iron worker for 30 years. And this is the first time anybody's ever thanked you for anything.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And as a young engineer working his way up through the system, being patted on the back fairly regularly, I thought, how is it possible for a worker to go through 30 years of a life and not be thanked?
Yeah.
And I didn't know it. That was the beginning of I later created a business around this whole thing, but this was me, a brand new and beginning to be impacted by this kind of scenario over and over and over again. It hit me in a very, very big way. And I was experiencing the psychological effects of what we were doing to the point where I had to start picking up psychology books to understand. It was like backwards learning.
Sure.
I was experiencing it and then going to the books and reading the theories behind it.
And you hate reading.
I hate reading, but I had to. I just had to try to understand what is happening here. It made, and I just, and again, it's all around this whole subject. I mean, it's like you affect somebody's life, they go home, and, you know, one woman told me, she says, yeah, he says, what are you doing with my husband at work? She pulled me off to the side. She says, what are you doing with my husband at work? This is a different group. And I said, I don't know. We're just trying to improve the job. She said, well, he comes home. He's in a better mood. He doesn't argue so much anymore. He doesn't kick the dog when he walks through the door. Even the household was being affected by what we were doing at work.
Yeah.
And these are huge lessons to learn in life. They were huge for me, and probably a basis for the reason that even though I don't read books, I had to write a book. So when I started my business 2 years into that, I had time. I had 3 months in the winter when I was doing nothing. I wrote this book. Simple little book. I even had to question myself, what are you doing writing a book? You don't read books. I wrote this book, sent it out to some friends in the field. They came back and said, yep, you're right on it. And Barbara and I, no publishers wanted it here again, but we're hearing the voices saying, I knew nothing about the spiritual world, but the intuition was saying, publish. So Barbara and I spent the money, published the book, got it into print, and the book built our business and paid off our house.
Yeah.
It was that successful. And I say that not to impress, but to impress upon people that when the purpose is true, when it's real. I didn't write that book to be an author. I didn't write it to make money. I didn't write it for any of those reasons. I wrote it because there was a message the business world needed to hear dramatically. And the little book said it in a very simple way. And it worked. And I just say to people that I'm talking to, they're in mid-career changes, whatever. I said, what are you passionate about? What do you feel strongly about? Because if you can turn that passion into a business or a career, you'll do very well. I don't know, we're morphing into different subjects, but these all relate to who we are as human beings living this experience here on the planet.
That's right.
This is our one chance. In this particular life, again, I'm going to have more, but
Yeah.
in this particular journey, if I can pull back and look at it and say, this is my opportunity to experience great abundance in this journey. And why not?
Why not?
And I'm being taught how to do that.
Yeah. And doing it in a way that feels in concert with the way you want to live.
Absolutely.
I don't know that there's another way to truly be, as you said, in abundance. We can go out and we can force things and we can fake things and we can pretend to be people that we're not.
Yeah.
But I don't think that leads to the abundance that you're describing.
Yeah. At this stage of my life, and I'll repeat my age in case I'm 78 years old. I'm in excellent health. When I was back in Ohio last summer, I found out that 2/3 of my high school class is dead.
Yeah.
You come to the realization at this point in life that, have you learned anything at all? And I've been given such wonderful lessons by the universe, and I continue to listen and continue to learn, and I live a joyful life. I will say that. Not without challenges, and I know challenges are part of the process. What can I learn from those challenges? I've learned my greatest lesson in life through my greatest challenges.
That's right.
So why would I even decry those?
You can't. You can. It feels like a waste.
If you learn from a lesson that was hard,
Yeah.
and then you meet someone who's going through that, I never tell anybody what to do. In all the interactions, unless somebody asks me directly, what can I do? which they never do. They usually just listen. I just tell my story.
Yeah.
And say, here's what happened to me. Take it and do with it what you will. And the feedback is usually very, very good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes sense. Peter, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me come over today.
Have we talked 6 hours yet?
Oh, probably 17. I don't know what day it is at this point, but thank you so much for inviting me into your home. I think this is exactly the conversation I've been wanting to have. Yeah. We nailed it.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I hope that there's been enough here. Just share. I mean, we all share, and the more we share with each other, the better it gets, the more we learn. And there's obviously so much more there. Maybe we can do it another time.
Oh, we will.
And
Yeah.
continue to
I'll
discuss.
I'll see you for coffee sooner than later, I'm sure. Everybody, thank you so much for your time today. I really hope that you guys appreciated this conversation. I know that I did. Peter, I'll see you again very soon. And everyone, thank you so much.